when you were going through that, right? Were you like, from a mental perspective, because there's like two schools of thought. Like there's some people who, like, you say you were trying to be straight, right? And then there's some people who are like going through the exercise. They're like, this is never gonna be like it for me. But like, were you committed to like, okay, I really want to like try to be straight. Like I really want to like live into this. Or were you like, okay, let's just like move through this exercise and like just get this over with? Which
I
perspective
was
did
the
you fall in?
first. I
Yeah.
definitely wanted to, because it was taught to me that like God was not pleased. And more than life, I love God. Like more than anything, I was just kind of like, well, I want to be whatever God is pleased with, you know? And the thing that they would say is like, oh, well, we're all sinners, right? Like, and for me, I was just like, I don't want to be a sinner. Like, why do I
Yeah.
have to be a sinner? Like, I just want to be loved by God, and just whatever that needs to look like, that's what I want to be. And so for me, I was definitely tackling the sexuality part about my identity, because I felt like that was just the one thing that like I felt like I was doing everything else right. But just because I like women, I guess for whatever reason, God just won't accept me. And I had a very like hard time processing that. So mentally it was draining, because I did for a second think like, okay, God can really change me. Like, all right, bet God, you're gonna take these desires away, because the church taught me like these are not my desires, but they're desires of either a demon or some type of satanic influence or some
Yeah.
type of generational curse or whatever. And so I was like, all right, cool. So then if God don't like this, then God will just take it away. All right, bet. So I'm gonna just believe for that. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
didn't happen
And
though.
yeah. For sure, for sure. So then what was the moment where you kind of were like, okay, this is who I am. This is what it is. And I just have to, like, the process of reconciling it. Like, I love God, but I'm also gay. So
Yeah.
how do I move forward?
So my story gets a little deep, and it kind of enters into why I'm doing the work that I'm doing now. I actually tried to attempt suicide because I just could not reconcile it. I was that person that was just like, I internalized the homophobic, like, I guess I had internalized homophobia so much to the point where I tried to end my own life, because I felt like, okay, God, this don't make sense. You're gonna make me this way. I didn't ask for these feelings. Then they say, like, okay, well, you can be born again and all this kind of stuff. I get born again. I still got these feelings. I feel like at this point you playing mind games with me, because I'm praying, I'm fasting, I went through the deliverance stuff. And these aren't just like feelings. My body is responding in ways that I am not asking for it to respond. And I'm also not acting on this. So I was living like a very single life for about 7 years. No action, no nothing, just trying to like kill the flesh. And I just got so frustrated, because I felt like, well, maybe God, this is just not what, I can't live this life. So let me just do the work for you, since I'm an abomination anyway. I had a lot of anger. And so I
Yeah.
responded out of that anger. And I tried to harm myself, ended up being in the hospital. When I was in the hospital, I just remember God saying to me, like, you've been trying to live your life in front, like, for people who won't even be here to see you die. Because during that time, it was COVID. And so nobody was able to come into the room. Like the doctor, it was just me and one or two doctors, and like they're pumping me with fluids and all this kind of stuff. And so like I had a real moment where it was like, man, like, the only reason why you haven't really been able to live in your truth and stand in your truth is because of what everybody else has been saying about you. But like, you have your own relationship with God, and what have you experienced with God? And from then I started just reading off like kindness, patience, gentleness, and none of that was ever a factor as it pertained to my sexuality. And then I just remember God like really like stirring up my heart to just say, yo, like, why don't you just trust me? Trust my love for you, you know what I'm saying? And live your life. And from there, that moment in the hospital was like the defining moment. That was like, all right, bet. I've been trying to live this one way. And that like hospital moment was the death of me denying myself. And coming out of that hospital, I chose to live a new life because I got a second chance, essentially. And so I was like, well, since I can't take that power into my own hands and in my life, I have the power to change my life. and live in a different way. And so that's what I chose to do.
I love that. I love that. I'm glad that you're here with us and doing this work. What coming out of that, what were the conversations that you had with your family, your pastor? Do you still go to the church? Like what did things look like after that?
Yeah, so I had actually left the church a while ago, just because outside of sexuality, it was a few other things that I just was not agreeing with, as far as like how they handle people in general. But coming out, the first step was coming out to myself, and just accepting, like, the first thing was like, I think I'm bisexual. But I just went with it. I was like, all right, we're gonna go with that. And then from there, like, as I started to like get to know myself a little more, I started to explore myself. I started to explore with other people. Then I realized, like, okay, I definitely love women. Like, I'm definitely in that space. So coming out for myself was one. And then the next step was coming out to my family. And that was actually not as bad as I thought it was. I think I dramatized it. Is that a word? Dramatized, whatever that word is. I did that so much to the point where I was so scared, but they already kind of knew. So the response was kind of like, yeah, we knew. Yeah. But we're glad you figured it out, right? You know, and the other side of it was they were still conservative. So my parents, even though they knew, they still were kind of like, we don't believe that this is God's best for you, but we still will try to, like, you know, support you. And so it's been a journey, like, with my parents. My father was just very much like, girl, I knew I love you anyway. My mom was more so on the more religious end, from a standpoint of, you know, I just don't believe this is God's best, but it's been a give and take type of thing, where she tries to meet me in the middle, where she doesn't always understand, but she tries to be open. And I also try to be understanding of her apprehensions, and also understanding that she was like this her whole life. She believed something her whole life. So I can't have an expectation for her to just automatically change everything that she's ever believed and ever felt, because I now have accepted this part about me. And so there's a level of just grace that kind of comes in, give and take on both ends. But overall, it was a really beautiful situation, which I know that doesn't happen for everybody. You know what I'm saying? And so I was definitely grateful for that. And the last part, which is coming out to the world. That was cool. I don't believe that everybody has to come out. No. And I always tell people this, just because they see me do it and they're like, man, how do I come out? And I'm like, man, I don't know if you need to come out. Like, but for me, I needed to come out because I also was a public figure that was denying and not affirming the queer community. And so because I had stood up on stages, I was traveling and speaking against this, I knew that I had to come out and affirm not just myself, because that was mostly what it was for. I had to affirm the person that I denied publicly. I needed to affirm me publicly, but then also be accountable for my words, you know what I'm saying? And take some of that stuff back, the harm that I had caused with my words, because I wasn't affirming the things that I said to people who were queer, and they were trying to seek and reconcile their faith and sexuality. Like, I had to kind of go back and clean some of that stuff up. So that was my other reason for coming out. It was necessary for me.